Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special day for utopians and for non-utopians who might be utopians one day. The thing is that I'm here with a few words for you. My opening remarks will refer briefly to this Utopia Day and to Utopia. Do you know Utopia? Who knows Utopia? No? Okay. Okay, some people are already utopians. The thing is that, as you may know, the best universities all over Europe are organized in alliances, right? It's part of a political project by the European Commission some 7 years ago. And Utopia is one of the 73 alliances which have been created among the best universities in Europe. It's an extremely difficult and complex effort to work in any of these universities. Can you imagine what it means to work with 9 other universities which are as complex as yours? That's what alliances try to do. And it's a tough work, but it has some rewards. And among the rewards of this joint effort, we have some incredibly nice activities like hackathons, like summer schools, like talks, like mobility, and that's something which is at the service of students. That's for you to take advantage of this reorganization of European higher education. But I'm not here to talk about all these. I'm here just to say welcome to ESCI. On behalf of Pompeu Fabra University, I am honored to be here to welcome you, to thank you for being here, and I hope you enjoy this wonderful session you're about to have. I have a quite close connection with ESCI. I really appreciate how well, we work on several areas, and one of these areas has to do directly with Utopia, because they are making an effort to be part of a new joint program. It's called Ecotopia. And even though ESCI and UPF are not exactly the same entity, we work very well together. And again, I am honored and thankful for being here inaugurating this session. As you know, this session on science diplomacy will have Mark Jeffery as moderator, and then after that we'll have Eric Piaget and Andrea Noferini, 2 experts on this topic, and I hope you enjoy the session as much as I will. Okay, so thank you and welcome. When you want.
Okay, gosh, it feels strange sitting down in this chair and talking to everybody. These sessions tend to work best when the moderator, who's actually been put in a chair miles away from the other 2, when the moderator knows absolutely nothing about the subject, so can ask lots of innocent questions to experts, and I don't have to pretend about not knowing anything about the subject, and we have 2 experts, Eric Piaget, who's a researcher at, correct me if I'm wrong here, the United Nations University Institute on Comparative Regional Integration Studies in Brugge, yes, and at the Vrije Universiteit de Brussels. And Andrea, we've known each other for years, so it feels very strange to be up here introducing him to people. But yes, you're a lecturer at the political science at the Pompeu. You were at the Autonoma, you were at eBay, and now you're a lecturer at the diplomatic school, the Barcelona. What's it called? The Centre for International Studies, if I get it right. And one of the courses you do is specifically on science, diplomacy, and foreign policy in Latin America. So again, two absolute experts. I'd like to start maybe by asking Eric a general question about all this. Again, from my position of total ignorance, and then I'd ask everybody, you already know me, if you could think for questions, because I'm going to open the floor to questions at the end of the session. So if you could think of questions, if there's things you want to know, if something's not clear and I don't pick it up, then please prepare your questions, so I'll ask at the end. But to start, Eric, could you help a bit with the definition of science diplomacy? I'm not entirely clear. I did some reading, and the report from the European, the External Action Service in 2022 said it's not possible to define this. And then the report from the European Commission a few weeks ago gave a definition. So what's going on?
Well, this is on. Perfect. Can you all hear me? Good. So yeah, the field of science diplomacy is this marriage of two very distinct worlds, science and diplomacy. And well, they've intertwined since antiquity, really. They're both ancient practices. As you mentioned, well, a lot of people talk about the Silk Road being sort of this conduit that had a lot of significance for both diplomacy and science. But one of the places I always like to start is in like 1300 BC. One of the first recorded peace agreements in history, the Treaty of Kadesh, which ended over 200 years of fighting between the Egyptians and the Hittites, resulted, the first correspondence after was the Hittite king Hattusilis writing to the Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses for medical expertise to help his sister conceive. So it was like solidifying the peace through science. And all throughout antiquity, the Silk Road, the Roman Empire, science and technology, they were really, important aspects to leverage diplomatically. And in the Enlightenment, we have the founding fathers of the United States, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. They all had diplomatic postings, and they were able to sort of augment their diplomatic clout by having all of these, advanced or successes in the scientific field. Benjamin Franklin being a physician and a biologist, and doing all of these experiments with electricity. When he arrived as ambassador of France, everybody wanted to talk to him because of his scientific profile. He was very much a man of the Enlightenment. Then moving forward to the 20th century, you also see a lot of interactions between science and diplomacy. In the Cold War, for example, science became an area of cooperation between the Soviets and the United States. The Lacey-Zarubin Agreement allowed for a framework for lots of agreements regarding polio vaccine development, and also work with laying the groundwork for nuclear fusion, which we can see right now in the ITER in south of France. But it also was a point of conflict. You have the space race, you have the arms race, but it was also a point where there was a lot of cooperation. After the Cold War, it was a unipolar world order, very much defined by Fukuyama's end of history. More and more countries were becoming liberal democracies. Liberal democracies don't go to war with one another. And thus, we've reached this end of history. Joseph Nye's idea of soft power became really, really prevalent. And it was in this period that, countries like the United States and the United Kingdom were kind of the first to start using, scientific advisors in diplomacy. And there was this kind of phenomenon coming where there was a lot more interactions between the scientific ecosystems and the diplomatic ecosystems, which led to the Royal Society of the UK and the American Association for the Advancement of Science to develop this three-part idea of what is science diplomacy. So, science diplomacy has existed, but it was all sort of implicit. In 2010, it becomes explicit. And there's this three-part taxonomy. Science in diplomacy, which is scientific advice that guides diplomatic processes. Science for diplomacy, which is sort of like science being used as a soft power or as a bridge to wider or better diplomatic agreements. And then diplomacy for science, which is when diplomatic activities can pave the way for more scientific cooperation. But then the semantic issue, what is science and what is diplomacy? Well, I'm American and Swedish, and in America, science generally, conjures the images of lab coats and telescopes. But in Sweden, vetenskap, it can be anything in the humanities and the social sciences. So you have to be a little sensitive to who you're talking to about what science actually means to them. And diplomacy, well, diplomacy is, since the 30 Years' War, been very much in the remit of the nation state, this Westphalian system. But more and more, you have, like, from the late 19th century, you see the first international organizations becoming big diplomatic actors. And in the 20th century, you see more the rise of corporations and civil society that are also kind of populating the diplomatic playing field. And universities also are becoming more and more important actors in the field of science diplomacy. So I hope I maybe touched upon your question well.
Okay, yes, good. So how do you see, I understand that, but could you make a clearer distinction between science diplomacy and public diplomacy, the concept of public diplomacy, which has been sort of developed for the Americans from the 60s onwards? I mean, where's that, how does that play out? Because it relates to one of your points about the three strands, but I'm not sure.
Oh, yes. Well, I don't think you should view them as different types of diplomacy. Rather, they're all sort of involved in this, under the umbrella of new diplomacy. Public diplomacy is actually my main hobby horse, and there's a great public diplomacy scholar, Nicholas Cull, and he has these 5 different tenets of public diplomacy: listening, advocacy, cultural diplomacy, exchange, and international state broadcasting. With cultural diplomacy, there's a big tie with science. You know, if you looked at the World Expo, I don't know if any of you have been to Brussels, but we have the atomium, which is like this big iron crystal molecule that is blown up 165 billion times. That is showing, you know, the Belgian culture using the scientific advancements. So there's a lot of interactions between science and cultural diplomacy. And then another aspect of public diplomacy is an exchange. That is a big aspect of science diplomacy as well. Like, you know, scientists being able to research, have an academic exchange somewhere else. So, you know, there's a lot of overlaps between these two fields.
Could I pick up on you, because I mean, for the audience, in terms of define, because you worked in public diplomacy as well as your hobby course. So could you sort of say, make it clear what's the difference between normal diplomacy and public diplomacy and science diplomacy? How would you distinguish between these three things, just so we got the...
Yes, well, I would say diplomacy in a very sort of succinct definition is like the vehicle for realizing foreign policy objectives. And so diplomacy is the noun, and then science diplomacy, it's like using science, scientific channels for foreign policy purposes. And public diplomacy would be sort of engaging with foreign publics for foreign policy purposes. So yeah, diplomacy is always the noun, and then there's all of these different adjectives. And you know, sometimes there's a lot of overlaps between those different adjectives. So it's this broad umbrella, new diplomacy. But science diplomacy, I think, is a very potent strand of that.
Okay, thank you. So if I could come to you, Andrea. So some idea of, okay, well, what science diplomacy is, but it seems to have become a very fashionable topic now. So the European Commission on the 27th of February this year published a proposal to encourage the European Council to publish a recommendation on creating a European framework for science diplomacy. So they're obviously taking it seriously at a very high level in Brussels. Why is that? Well, what's the interest? Is it just sudden interest, or has it always been there and we've not seen it?
Thanks, Mark. Good morning to all, and thanks for the invitation. And thanks to Eric for having introduced already the idea, because I would start from the same point. I mean, the relation between science and power is not new. In some of the examples that you show, we observe that there is a very strict connection between the power, the exercise of power, and science, innovation, and technology. No, so we are not inventing the wheel for the second time. But your question is very compelling, because if we discover, if we admit now that science diplomacy today has become fashionable, is in the political agenda of the Commission, the EU institution, the governments of member states, it means that something has changed. And I think that in order to understand the problem is not to focus on the definition of science diplomacy, that is pretty complex if we want, but it has to do with the relation between foreign policy, diplomacy, and science. Sometimes these two fields have not been as connected as we think they should be today. Today, the interest that someone says, or we must admit that we are in a new world scenario. Something has already changed. There's the crisis of liberal democracy, if we want to take it, or the crisis of multilateralism. And this, I think, that has switched the interest again on science and technology and innovation as a geopolitical currency. And this is a terminology that is used in some official documents by the Council, the Commission. No? Science and innovation has a geopolitical instrument, geopolitical currency. Of course, no, we are not naive. We are pretty familiar with this idea, no, that technology, innovation applied to military field, for example, have determined, no, the dominance of the Western society during colonialism, imperialism, etc. This is not new. What is new today is that with respect to the post-World War II scenario, let's say the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, no? Just to frame a little bit historically the issue, the idea that was science was very important for economic growth, for increasing productivity, but we depoliticize a little bit science. Today, in a world in which we have new threats, high artificial intelligence, the misuse and the misinformation of information, the rare materials, and geopolitical imbalances, we politically, this idea that external action, foreign policy, diplomacy must have stricter and better connection with science, because science become geopolitical. Technology, innovation are a couple of instruments that the European Union must use in order to compete in this new, more fragmented, less multilateral kind of world. No? So there's today, I think, this new emphasis on the role that science can play in order to define the role of the European Union in the rest of the world, but also internally, because the European Union, as I'm sure that you know, because you have great professors, the European Union is a club of 27 member states. For each one of them, they do have their own foreign policy and their own science policy. So I think that the main reason is geopolitical interest, and this will bring some new opportunities, but also some problems that the European Union must deal with.
Okay, could you maybe develop the opportunities? Because I can see the big picture, but if you said, okay, what are examples of the things we're trying to achieve specifically? I mean, openly up to both of you.
Good point. I mean, now, for example, no, we are reading, we are listening to this idea sponsored by the institution, no, that the European Union should develop a framework, no, a joint framework for science diplomacy at EU level. That means, for example, increasing the connection between Utopia. Utopia is a great example of how universities, no, can join together on international and I would say also transnational. Probably, no, you must ask at the end in question and answer session what is the difference between international and transnational, if you're not familiar with this. But for example, no, these consortia of universities or universities playing international external action or international relation is very important. And in this case, it's not easy to sign agreement or memorandum of understanding with the third country. So you need, in this case, no, the negotiation role of Minister of Foreign Affairs together with Minister of Culture. And if we open the black box of any of each member states, in Italy, for example, science policy is differently framed with respect to German science policies. And think about, if we have 27 policy for science, culture, innovation, and technology, then we have 27 foreign policy. And the goal is to construct, build up a common framework for science diplomacy. We will have some problems of coordination at least, but the opportunity side of this, that given this fragmented, less cooperative international scenario, probably the European Union must found the incentives in order to try to foster synergies among these 27 fragmented silos.
Okay. And so I'm sort of trying to push a bit further onto that, because I mean, when I was trying to read the proposed for the framework decision, and the Commission identified, it said, 3 main challenges where research and innovation are necessary. So it said the European Union is falling behind the USA and China in terms of innovation. It said we have to decarbonize the economy. We need science for security, meaning defense, I guess, and for reducing strategic dependencies, like you already mentioned, rare earths. So I see the need for science in all of these things. I still can't make the connection between science, that and science diplomacy. So what does science diplomacy bring to me more than science brings to me in this? I mean, I don't know if you want to start that or...
Measure success in science is very different to how you measure success in diplomacy, I think. So they're indeed very, very different worlds, but I think they can have a lot of symbiotic benefits. Scientists, as this report, the Royal Society and American Association for the Advancement of Science report says, scientists and diplomats are not obvious bedfellows. But what the scientists bring is very much this background in long-term trust-based research collaborations where they all speak the same language. This universal scientific method, transparency, rationality, all of that, and this can sort of limit or reduce the space for political disagreements. I think you can see that with the developments of lots of different multilateral treaties. They were the result of lots of, for example, Paris Climate Agreement or 1987 Montreal Protocol, whatever. But these result in lots of working groups of scientists that sort of work to develop a shared consensus on the facts using this shared scientific model. And thus the space for political disagreements, whilst they still happen, is significantly reduced. So that's one aspect. And I think, there's evidence-informed policymaking. That's what I think marrying science more into diplomacy is one of the big benefits of that. And just scientists can maintain channels of dialogue even when political situations are frayed. For example, and also when diplomatic relations are established again, often the first thing that comes about is a science and technology agreement. That's the first thing that happened after rapprochement with Cuba and the United States in 2015. They start cooperating on science. And in fact, it was using scientific channels to kind of start that rapprochement officially. Because meteorologists in Cuba and the United States were in contact throughout the years of embargo. So these scientific channels, as long as they're nurtured, that's the problem. Is now, as you were saying, science was very depoliticized before. Now it's becoming very politicized, and sometimes political systems don't allow those channels to continue, and that is quite an alarming thing. I noticed that traveling a few times to the Arctic after the Russian invasion of Ukraine and all of the scientific sanctions on Russia in the Arctic, which I didn't really see the connection between that and the war in Ukraine. And as much as Russia needed to be punished for this illegal invasion, I think it shoots ourselves in the foot when we sanction them for projects far up in the north that don't really have any political dimension to them. Sorry, that was a bit of a rambling question, but sorry if you want me to focus on another area.
No. But I'm still wondering to what extent the terms of science is being affected by politics, but isn't everything else? I mean, relations that go beyond countries, not non-diplomatic relations between countries, whether it's scientific or commercial, which is the big thing here, is School of International Commerce. So, but international commerce is equally affected by policy. If political relations are complicated, trade is complicated. If political relations are good, trade is good. Isn't that automatic? Or what does science bring, which makes that different?
Look, one of the sentences in one of these last report is the following: let's make science as open as possible, but as closed as necessary. That is contrast a little bit, no, this idea that science is a universal public good that must be replicable, transparent, accessible. No, this was the liberal understanding of what is science. Science is a universal public good that is available for all Russian scientists as well as U.S. scientists. Today, this framework under this sentence, not as close as necessary, means that we must use this lens of strategic political utilization of science. That means that if we have some, I will try to set a silly example. Let's see if I'm able. If some scientists are investigating some rare material or some development related to artificial intelligence, before make public this patent, because announcing this to the international free scientific community, they must be a little bit more cautious, speak to their political reference, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Prime Minister, in order to see if this discovery or this advancement may go in favor of the national interest. If it's not the case, and probably we are scientists, no? We are social scientists. Sometimes we have not received any training in diplomatic missions or in how to treat with other colleagues from different countries, no? Because we feel. I'm always felt pretty free in my when I go around visiting or making conferences. No, today probably this free understanding of science, etc., is changed a little bit. Everything has changed in terms of these new geopolitical tensions, these new more fragmented and more competitive world. So this is going to open some trade-offs. How can the European Union sponsor a free and open science when at the same time, under this strategic open autonomy, is trying to maintaining some competitiveness or the defense of the European interests? So.
That's a good segue to just talk about a little bit of the work we've been doing at Utopia, which is, in addition to these three types of science diplomacy, science in diplomacy, science for diplomacy, diplomacy for science, we've developed this, my mentor Luc van Langenhove and another colleague at VUB, Jean-Claude Bergelman, have developed what they call the fourth dimension of science diplomacy, diplomacy in science, which is where scientists, academics, researchers, students, those involved in sort of the scientific ecosystem, learn that they actually have a diplomatic responsibility on behalf of science and on behalf of knowledge. And thus, we are suggesting that universities kind of equip researchers and academics with these kind of diplomatic skills to be better prepared for operating in this more contested terrain, as you really put nicely.
Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah, of course.
And indeed, I think this is a good news for you, because there's an important need, and there's a demand for new professional profiles that can have some abilities, competencies in international relations, in protocols, in diplomacy, being, for example, specialists in marine the species. No, I mean, if we are from hard science, by biologists or a doctor, sometimes I can't have any idea about political life or how deals or international treaties are signed among states, because I'm a specialist in my discipline. No. Sometimes we do training in public diplomacy for Latin American countries, and the public, the audience are specialists from different scientific disciplines that they admit that they don't know anything about politics, public policy, international relations, and today they recognize that these competencies, these abilities can help them in developing their activities as scientists.
So maybe there's a definitional question of science, because science covers so many things. I mean, you've already mentioned sort of natural sciences and social sciences, but I'd say, I mean, first of all, there's somebody has to decide in just terms of natural science. You said about, I think you mentioned opened and closed things, but if you're talking about developing new technologies and whatever, if you're finding new weapons technology, that clearly is not something you're going to want to share, and there'll be prohibitions on it. Intermediate technologies, drone technologies, that's civil or military, is a good question. So someone's got to decide on those limits. So the question is, for information that potentially could be made public elsewhere, who decides those limits? And another question might be that a lot of this research, you mentioned AI, all of that is private research. The people who are doing AI have no intention or no intent to share that with anybody else. They don't want to. So how do you work in these different categories of science? Who decides what should be shared and what shouldn't?
I can have a crack at this if you want. So. Well, yeah, indeed. There seems to be, my colleague Rasmus Bertelsen in Tromsø, he talks about this moral panic whenever there's a conflict, that everything kind of, there's this knee-jerk reaction to kind of close off and, barricade yourself against, this looming threat. So I think things get a little bit, like fears over dual use. Fortunately, now everything is becoming dual use. Even tennis rackets can be dual use because of certain materials that they're using can also be used for military systems. And indeed, it's becoming much harder and harder to find areas that can be open. But this is, I think, an example of where it comes in very handy for scientists to be equipped with sort of a diplomatic skill box. A very good example is James Hammond. He's a British volcanologist based at Birkbeck University, London. And he's been working for the last few decades on Mount Paektu in northern North Korea. It's a big volcano, and monitoring it has a lot of important implications for the region. If it were to erupt, it would really severely damage many aspects in that part of the world. So it's in everybody's interest to continue monitoring it. However, after some rounds of ballistic missile testing, the United Nations put sanctions on North Korea. And then to get all of the equipment that James Hammond was using to monitor sort of the activity of the volcano became dual use, and it was prohibited to be expanded there, but sent there rather. But due to his good contacts at the British Foreign Office and some impressive diplomacy at the United Nations, they were able to wrangle some exemptions to that, and scientific cooperation can continue. So unfortunately, it seems like a case-by-case basis is the best way forward. I suppose it's not losing track of the benefits of openness, but risk-aware openness, I think, is a good. I don't like this open as possible, closed as necessary, because it's very kind of abstract. It leaves it very open. What is as much as possible, and what is as much as necessary? It's really, really sort of not concise. But risk-aware openness. I think to have openness as the objective, but to be very mindful of risks is how we should focus on it.
Okay. So go to different things. I mean, you already talked about utopia a bit, and the role of universities in that could play in this. So my question here would be, as far as I can see, I used to teach international relations and international law. Diplomacy is something that happens between central governments.
Not today
public,
anymore.
So you can correct me on this, but public diplomacy is much broader in that sense. But to what extent could regions, cities, universities have a role in science diplomacy?
I think that you are right in starting with the idea that diplomacy, international relations were and still are, if we want, reserved to central government ministries. But today, in the world of international relations and external actions has deeply changed. No, we use these terms of para-diplomacy. No, that is gonna widen a little bit, the borders of who is entitled to run international relations. Legally speaking, you must be a diplomat. If you want to enter into formal relation with officials from third country, you must be a diplomat. But nevertheless, the real world of external action today observes a plethora, a set of new actors that are play international. Cities, Barcelona is an example. Barcelona is doing advocacy, lobbying on the housing crisis. The housing crisis is not only specific of Barcelona. I'm Italian, by the way, if you did not realize earlier. Florence, I'm from Florence. Florence, Rome, Paris, they are all crossed by these gentrification issues, etc., etc. So in this case, is this an example of scientific diplomacy at the subnational, sub-state level? Yes, it might be. It might be if, for example, Barcelona prepare evidence-based solution that can share with other cities, that then they form a coalition in order to lobby, in order to put pressure on EU institutions that can prepare a directive, a regulation on housing. This is what, and this is pretty new. It's pretty new because we see new actors, cities, together with regions, together with universities. Knowledge is a consequence of a complex set of networks. Catalonia is doing a great job in terms of fostering synergies between public, private actors. So that's true that today the realm or the context of international relations accept new actors. Among these actors we have universities, cities, regional governments, etc., etc. And then these new wicked problems, these complex problems, they require to overcome the national boundaries. So these new actors, they must play internationally, transnationally, and at the same time the knowledge, the innovation, the science can be used in order to solve this problem internally, and let's see if then make it a little bit more available. That's the trade-off.
I want to go ahead.
Yeah, just to kind of build upon that was very, very good analysis. But it reminded me of this quote. I think it was of George Kennan. He was U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union at the time of the Cold War really starting to get cold, and he wrote The Long Telegraph, which kind of outlined the U.S. policy of containment. And well, in his later years, in his retirement, he was reflecting on traditional diplomacy, and he observed that 21st century diplomacy consists of 19th century training for dealing with 20th century problems. And I think these new types of diplomacy, this broader array of international actors like cities. Here in Barcelona, you have SciTech DiploHub. Globally, you have like the Global Covenant of Mayors, the C40, Cities 40 initiative. These are all very much getting more and more involved and helping that traditional diplomacy that's sort of still stuck in the past adapt, I think, to more contemporary challenges. And you also see it on the para-diplomacy or proto-diplomacy. There's two different terms. California and my state of Massachusetts, New York. When my dear leader Donald Trump pulled the United States out of the Paris Climate Agreement, well, then these cities still maintain their commitment to it. So you can kind of see that on a regional level, that this science diplomacy is kind of continuing to, it's a platform for them to continue engaging on the global stage on scientific-related issues.
Can I ask you, how does utopia relate to those, what you were saying about other actors? I mean, is utopia a product of science diplomacy, or is it an actor in science diplomacy, or could it be an actor? Is it?
Good question. Good question.
Well, I think it's both, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think utopia is a product of, wanting to create more cohesion between higher education, which, is sort of linking different countries, university systems closer together. And then this is coming at a time with like these great global challenges and sort of a breakdown of multilateral institutions. And I think there's this vacuum that needs to be filled. And I think university alliances, and Utopia is not just the first one. I was in Poland the other week at another alliance for them. They were organizing a science diplomacy conference. And we have the EU Science Diplomacy Alliance, which is like a platform for all of these stakeholders in science diplomacy. Utopia is a member, and then there's a few other alliances that have joined. So you can see there's a building acknowledgement that universities and the alliances that they constitute have quite a substantial playing field to operate in. Yeah.
Very much. Well, it has been very interesting, and thank you very much. We could talk for a lot more time, but the clock has caught up. We've already run over, and Joan Perez waving at me and this kind of thing. So I shall. I believe that Albert wants to say that we'll say some closing words. So. Could I perhaps thank the speakers first? So if I could give a big thank you to Eric and to Andrea.
Thank you. And to our moderator.
And invite Albert to come up and give some closing words.
Shall we stay here? Or?
I think so. It's time for closing remarks. As the director of the school, I am extremely pleased of this succession of European days that we have had. Last year we had the European Day on the Erasmus program, how it was launched, how it was developed, how it was at that moment. Now, let's say, we are, as you know, a very active institution in the Erasmus program. We are small, but our intensity of use and good use of the Erasmus funds, it's noticeable. In fact, we are extremely proud, and thanks for Lai and the team in international relations, because we have been able to expand almost every year the funds available, because we use them very well, and we can expand them year after year. So we are very much involved with what's the Europe Day. We are in it, and we are actively in it. This year, the Europe Day here has been much more a Utopia Day. It was in ESCI, but it was very much a Utopia Day, because these issues of science diplomacy, we do not teach science here. It's not our business. Our business is business and marketing, you know. We do not teach diplomacy. We are a private-oriented school. We are not a public affairs-oriented school. So I'm very proud of having all of you here and having had this also as part of the European integration course, because this enlarges, expands your horizons. But the topic of today has been a utopia topic. So this has been the topic of UPF, and the topic that is also active among the universities that are part of the Utopia Alliance. And we are also very happy of this, because we are also keen and proud of being an active part of what Utopia is. Also in this case, it's very much a Europe Day, because science is a European topic, diplomacy is a very much European topic, but we feel intensely that we were first, we have become second, we became seconds, we are becoming thirds, and we are risking going downwards. So we have to make efforts in science, in diplomacy, but also in business and marketing to go to accelerate a bit and be more ambitious, highly cooperative among us, and be aware that at each level, ESCI, UPF, Utopia, Europe, we have to be speeding up, putting a lot of ambition, a lot of tension, but thanking a lot all those scholars here that give us some signs of alert and some advice on how to handle them. So thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you very much, Andrea. And thank you very much all.